human history. It was taken from Apollo 8 by astronaut William Bill Anders on Christmas Eve 1968 during NASA's first manned lunar orbit mission. It not only captured the world, it changed it.
We went to the moon to explore the moon. What we really did was just discover the Earth. And so I think Earthrise will go down in history as an iconic first real view of our home planet, which is very fragile and very delicate.
Bill Anders returned from space to a hero's ticker-tape welcome and went on to live a remarkable life. His son confirmed that he died aged 90, piloting a light aircraft which crashed just off the coast of Jones Island in Washington state, saying the family were devastated by his death. Astrophysicist Rosemary Coogan recently qualified to become only the UK's third ever astronaut. For her, Earthrise provides a humbling perspective.
What we can learn from these photos is really the context of where we are, seeing ourselves from afar, realising we are part of something so much bigger, how beautiful our planet is, how much we need to appreciate our place in it and look after it.
Bill Anders will always be missed by those he knew and always remembered for the image he captured of a beautiful and fragile Earth. Fraser Maud, Sky News.
Stunning. Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the journalist and author, Christina Patterson, and the executive director of the Youth Endowment Fund, John Yates. Amongst the stories we'll be discussing this, second lead on the front of the Observer, Israel celebrating the rescue of 4 hostages. We'll be back with more on that and other stories. Do stay with us.
This isn't the first time China has landed on the moon. It's several times, and it's not the first time that China's brought samples back from the moon. This is actually the second time, but it's the first time that anyone has ever taken samples from the far side of the moon. The moon is tidally locked to the Earth, so the same side pretty much always faces Earth, and the other side we pretty much never see. And this is really challenging, even to land on the far side of the moon, because unlike on the near side, we don't have direct line of sight for relaying communications. So you have to put a satellite in orbit around the moon and bounce signals off that to the lander in order to even communicate to it. Now, China's gone to the South Pole region, specifically a permanently shadowed impact crater, so something that's caused by a huge impact. And this region is significant because potentially this is where humans will settle on the moon in the future, because the permanently shadowed crater regions are where we believe water ice exists. And so if water ice exists, potentially water also exists, which we know is required for sustaining life. And so the samples that this ascender brings back to Earth will tell us if there is water ice in the lunar soil, and if this is a suitable place for humans. It's also a suitable place for humans because there's permanently sunny regions where we could generate power for human colonization in the future. So it is a prime site for even Artemis mission, NASA's Artemis human missions that they plan to send in the few coming years.
Welcome back. You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, our top stories. 4 Israeli hostages have been successfully rescued in Gaza, but Hamas has claimed more than 200 Palestinians were killed during the mission. The wife of TV doctor Michael Mosley has thanked people still looking for him 4 days after his disappearance on the Greek island of Symi. And Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has returned to the election campaign, pledging to cut stamp duty and a U-turn on ULEZ as the row over his early D-Day departure continues. You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author, Christina Patterson, and the Executive Director of the Youth Endowment Fund, John Yates. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The Sunday Times looks ahead to Labour's election manifesto launch this week, saying it will include cast-iron pledges not to put up income tax, national insurance or VAT. According to The Observer, among the other pledges will be the opening of 80 new courts to clear the backlog of cases involving sexual violence against women and girls. The Sunday Express speaks to the Reform leader, Nigel Farage, who claims that his party are now the real opposition. While The Telegraph leads with a warning from the Energy Secretary that Labour's plans for net zero carbon emissions will cause power cuts and public unrest. The Mail on Sunday has the latest on the search in Greece for their missing colleague, Dr. Michael Mosley. The People speaks to his wife, who says she's determined not to give up hope of finding him safe and well. The Mirror carries a message from the Princess of Wales, saying she hopes to return to public duties very soon after undergoing cancer treatment. And The Star speaks to a woman who's named her son Lucifer, but doesn't understand all the negative feedback on social media. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Christina Patterson and John Yates. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the front page of The Observer, and obviously that news of the 4 Israeli hostages being rescued in that mission this evening. John, take us into this story.
Well, it's an extraordinary story. We're seeing the picture there of the Israeli hostage Noah Agamani on the front page, and she's been kept for 243 days. And many people will have seen the footage when she was captured. She was the girl on the back of a motorbike, captured screaming to the camera, "Don't kill me, don't kill me." And many of us were just haunted by that image, and we longed for her safety. Today we have, on the one hand, extraordinary good news that she's alive. She's been freed. It was clearly an extraordinary operation. The Israeli Special Forces managed to identify where she was without captives realising. They got forces into the refugee camp and they got her out and 3 other people safely. I mean, that's, on one hand, extraordinary and something to celebrate. It's very hard to fully celebrate. 100 Palestinians losing their lives, many of them children. I mean, if we just step back a little bit, if this was a normal hostage situation in our own country, of course we'd be delighted to see someone saved, but the loss of that many people's lives is an absolute tragedy. And there's blame to go everywhere again. What were Hamas doing, holding someone in the middle of a refugee camp, where surrounded by innocent people? But you've also got to say, was there any other way for this to be done? I'm delighted she's free. I would want nothing more than someone to be free. I just wish these things could be done without such horrendous loss of life. It just is a story that just continues to bring tragedy every time it turns up on the front pages. Yes, and as you say, those 4 freed, everyone delighted that they are back home with their families. But the huge loss of life, I think Hamas are actually saying that the figure is 200 lives have been lost in this rescue operation.
Yes, I mean, obviously, fantastic for the hostages who've been released and for their families, and one can only imagine the hell they have all been through. But as John says, the price is horrific. And there is something, war dehumanises almost everyone involved. And to see Israel celebrating today, of course they celebrate the fact that some hostages come back, but whether it's 100 people killed or 200 people killed, that is a terrible, terrible price. And again, John is right that essentially the whole population of Gaza is being held hostage by Hamas, and they have embedded the hostages and Hamas fighters amongst the civilian population. So from that point of view, they are holding everyone hostage. But when I heard the IDF spokesperson today saying that people, essentially Palestinians, if they don't want to be killed, they should move away, where are they meant to go? Every single part of Gaza is either has been or is under attack. And I'm afraid there have been opportunities to release the hostages before. It seems now very clear that Benjamin Netanyahu is determined to keep this war going for his own political purposes. And there are reports by Hamas that some of the hostages have been killed today. Those haven't been confirmed. We don't know how many hostages are still alive. But the devastation that has been caused in Gaza and the fact that Netanyahu, well, kind of throwing pretend bones to the US. And it's very clear now, Biden is very clear that they should be settling now. They should be negotiating. They should be letting the US take over and letting the Arab allies reach some kind of agreement that will bring an end to this thing. And Benjamin Netanyahu is refusing to do that. Of course, Hamas are the criminals here. They started this war and they are holding an entire population hostage. But enough is enough.
But still, the protests on the streets of Tel Aviv this evening, we saw with those saying that the hostages, there needs to be a deal to bring the hostages back, a substantial number of hostages, rather than rescue missions that are only freeing.
Yeah, and if you're trying to be an optimist, and it's very hard to be an optimist, if you're trying to be an optimist, I think, and there's a number of Palestinians interviewed today who said, look, this shows why Hamas's strategy is wrong, that actually we should have traded these hostages to get a load of Palestinians released. And so if you're trying to look for a bridge of hope, is there a way this story could create space for more criticism? Very difficult to criticise Hamas from within in Gaza, but is there space for more questioning? The thing that's unavoidably true here is what on earth would any country do in this situation, the situation Israel's in? You know, if ultimately the primary job, we're going to talk about security maybe later, who knows, the primary job of a prime minister is to protect citizens. And if your citizens are captured, you have to go in and save them. So I'm not particularly trying to criticise the Israeli government here, but I think anyone reading this story thinking, oh, isn't this just good news, I think is misreading the story. There is such loss of life. It's horrible to see, though I'm obviously thrilled to see the hostages released.
Indeed. Let's come back to the UK and the election campaign trail. Have a look at the Sunday Times. And Sir Keir Starmer promising not to raise taxes threefold. Christina.
Yes, well, this has been a depressing week in the election campaign and in politics generally. I thought the debate between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak was very depressing. I mean, I will personally be extremely relieved when Labour wins, which it will, and with a very big majority, which I assume it will. I'm afraid I didn't think Starmer performed very well, but that's not the end of the world. I thought Sunak disgraced himself with his £2,000 lie that has been repeated all week and is still repeated today. And one of the reasons that Keir Starmer is committing to this freeze on income tax, VAT and national insurance is because of the damage that was done by that £2,000 claim. And I fear, I mean, of course, nobody wants their taxes raised, but I think what people regard as more important is that public services in this country are visibly broken. And it's very hard to see where any of the funding is going to come from to make any of the changes that Labour says they want to make. So, of course, as a taxpayer, I'm pleased that apparently I'm not going to be paying more taxes, but I also would like a functioning NHS. And it's worrying because they're promising, the Labour's basic promise is change, and it's quite hard to see how that change is going to happen because they seem to be giving themselves not very much room for manoeuvre.
Just to move on, because we're running out of time, but staying on the campaign trail, let's move to the Telegraph, John, and this is Labour's net zero plan is too risky. Obviously, this is according to the Conservatives. Yeah, so look, the story basically runs that Labour's position is that the electricity supply in this country should be without any carbon in its production by 2030, so 6 years from now. So it's all got to be solar, wind and nuclear. The government's position is not that different. It wants to do the same thing, or the Conservative Party, I should say now. They want to do the same thing just 5 years later. So the story is your plan to do it early is bonkers. That's the basic story. You're not going to be able to do it, and as a result, we're all going to have blackouts. That's the basic sort of story. There's something to this. I mean, Starmer gets criticised for not being ambitious. He is actually being quite ambitious here, so I slightly applaud the ambitiousness. I do worry a bit whether it's doable. What do you need in order to get the carbon out of the economy? Well, you need to invest a certain amount of money. People think he's going to need to invest about 10 billion. He's plan to spend about 5 billion. You don't need to know how big those numbers are to know that 5 billion is about half of 10 billion. They also need to build a load of stuff. So they reckon you're going to need 10 or 12 big power plants that suck carbon out of the air. At the moment, do you know how many we've got in the country? None. We just should be... I think there's something to this. How seriously is it to get this done? But I must admit, I sit back a bit and say, why not have a bit of ambition? Maybe they can't do it and they'll have to delay it. I think it's quite unlikely we're going to end up with blackouts. Exactly. I think it's just going to happen a bit later than they have planned. But it's a good attack. If you're the Conservative Party, it's a good thing. It's a good bruise to hit because the plan does seem pretty hard to pull off. OK. John and Christina, thank you very much. We've run out of time. We're going to take a break. Coming up, Nigel Farage claims his Reform Party are now the real opposition. But is he right? We'll be discussing that next.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise.
Katie Spencer, Sky News in London.
Westminster may seem far from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but not for long. With a general election around the corner, we're bringing you Sunak versus Starmer, live from Grimsby. Putting their cases forward and facing questions from a live audience. Who will convince you to give them the keys to this place? The battle for number 10. Get the full story first on Sky News.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region.
I'm going to have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
They are coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street.
Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake, there'll be
Finished, I don't know.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. Still with me, Christina Patterson and John Yates. We're going to take a look, first of all, at the Express and Nigel Farage, who's now claiming that his party is the real opposition, buoyed by being not very many points behind the Conservative Party in the polls, John.
Yeah, well, we'll love him or hate him. He's arguably the star of the election. I mean, he's the person people are talking about. In a lineup that's not full of bursting with charisma, Farage brings a certain... People like to talk about him. And this story is saying that from now on, they are the real opposition. And he's saying within 6 years, they're going to take over the Conservative Party or replace them. And the only reform can hold Labour to account. I think there's, I mean, as ever with Farage, there's a lot of bluster. I think there's something to this and something not to this. So the thing that I think is nonsense is the idea that the Reform Party can hold Labour to account. They're going to win maybe 3 or 4 seats. Labour, on present prediction, are going to win about 400 seats. They're not going to be able to hold them to account. So I think we've got to be sort of a bit cold watery on that. But the idea they could take over the Conservative Party, I think it's credible. I mean, the latest prediction suggests the Tories could end up with 75 seats. That'd be the lowest in 200 years. And there's going to be then a question of who's going to lead the Tory party. I mean, a lot of people are going to lose their seats. Hunt's going to lose his seat. Mordaunt's going to lose her seat. Cleverly's going to... The obvious leaders, a lot of them are going to be gone. And the question for the person who becomes the leader will be, do you let Farage in? And it's going to be a huge debate, I think, between the 2 candidates who vie for Tory leadership. One of them will say, yeah, we'll have him in. Well, once the fox is in the henhouse, I think you've got to think he's going to find a way to get pretty close to some sort of position of authority. I don't know. I think something quite extraordinary could be happening here. It happened in Canada, where you saw the Conservative Party broadly fall apart and a new party take over. For those who aren't necessarily big fans of Nigel Farage, I don't love it. But I think he might be onto something.
Christina, what do you think? He's saying he's going to stage a hostile takeover of the Conservative Party.
Well, I agree with that. I think he will certainly try. I think it's really hard to say what will happen. I mean, clearly I am no Tory, and I do think that what has happened in the radicalisation of the Tory party post-2016 really has been a horrible thing to see, and I think it has caused our country enormous damage. But what the party have done, what the government has done, is nothing compared to what Nigel Farage would do. I mean, he's obviously not going to get his hands on the keys to Downing Street anytime soon. And people do find him sort of, personable, and they always think he's the guy they'd like to have a pint with and so on. But when you actually listen to what he says about, for example, immigration or stop and search or some of these issues, the things that he said during the debate last night, they are pretty chilling. And I think what he says, that is not the position of Reform, formerly UKIP, is very extreme, and it's not where the country is. So we could end up, I mean, maybe he will somehow take over the Tory party. It's not unimaginable. I can't see that party getting into power with such extreme policies. The other thing is that in this piece, he says that Boris Johnson had star appeal but was light on policy. Well, that is exactly true of Farage. He doesn't have any policies at all beyond dog whistle politics, really. So what it would do to the standard of debate and the quality of opposition, that's really worrying, because any government needs good opposition to hold them to account. And if this happens, there's not going to be one.
John, just quickly we'll move on to fit in this story in the Express and this motorway tribute for a hairy biker, Dave Myers, who passed away in February this year. Quite a visual image there.
This is genuinely lovely. The death of Dave Myers, the hairy biker, obviously has just touched a lot of people. And so you've got thousands of people from all over the world. So you've got people coming from Malaysia, from Texas, from all over Europe, coming and getting on effectively almost like a funereal procession, but it sounds way more joyful. They're all wearing sort of coloured T-shirts, meeting up in London and driving all the way to Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria. Why? Well, to remember this guy's life, but more than that, I think to say, look, we're together. We have something in common and we're part of this. And the school where they've driven to in Barrow, the pupils, a number of them are dressed up as this guy, Dave. They've got their moustaches, they've got their waistcoats, and they're doing some fundraising. I think it's just lovely, and I think it's what's good about Britain. It's bonkers. And it's heartwarming. And I think that's what we're rather good at as a country. So I think it's a lovely story.
Lovely, lovely tribute, John and Christina. Thank you both. Coming up next on Sky News at 11. Relief as Israeli hostages are released from Gaza, but grief too amid claims more than 200 Palestinians died in the operation.